The high grass sways under a pale, cloud-filtered sun as a small band of prehistoric humans moves slowly across the open savanna. In their hands and pouches are bones, the long metapodials of antelope, the slender ribs of smaller game, each carrying small, deliberate marks. Archaeologists tens of thousands of years later will recover such artifacts from sites like Labambo and Ishango, bearing sequences of carved notches. These are not random scratches from butchery. The marks are arranged in intentional groupings, sometimes in even spacing, sometimes in clusters that suggest a rhythm or count. In the moment the humans sit together on flat stones near a shallow river, the smell of recent fire is still lingering. One individual using a sharp flake of stone draws the edge across the bone in short, controlled strokes. A small group watches. Some nod, others point at the notches already there. The marks are few at first, perhaps 3 or 4, then another is added and another. The lesser-known detail is that some of the oldest notched bones appear to have been carried far from the sites where the animals were killed. This suggests the bones were valued for more than their original use, possibly serving as a physical memory, to track seasonal events, the phases of the moon, the arrival of migratory herds, or the ripening of particular plants. The unresolved mystery lies in what exactly these marks recorded. Some researchers argue they correspond to lunar cycles, noting the total counts on certain bones align roughly with 29 or 30 marks. Others suggest they may have tracked the number of animals taken in a hunt, or the days of a journey. Without accompanying symbols or context, the true intent remains uncertain. On a planetary scale, the very act of marking a bone reflects a shift in human cognition, from reacting to the immediate environment to abstracting time quantity and sequence into a durable form. As the climate of the late Pleistocene brings alternating wet and dry seasons, the ability to anticipate cyclical changes becomes critical. The band moves again by late afternoon, carrying the marked bones in skin pouches tied at the waist. When they reach another camp, some are placed near a hearth where others can see and perhaps contribute to them. The scene is simple, but it carries the beginnings of a shared record information, externalized into matter, lasting beyond the memory of a single person. In this, the marked bones are not just tools. They are the first steps toward a system that will eventually become counting. Word count 648. Awaiting continue in a shallow cave overlooking a bend in the river, a group of prehistoric humans gathers in the dim light of late dusk. The air is cool, carrying the scent of damp stone and nearby water. In the center, a flat piece of bone rests on a larger rock, its surface scored with shallow lines that run in a near-parallel sequence. A man and a woman sit close, leaning forward as one points to a set of 4 notches, then to another set of 4 further along. Others around them shift slightly, watching the gestures and following the direction of the finger. The action is slow, deliberate, and shared as though the marks carry meaning agreed upon by all present. Archaeological finds like the Ishango bone discovered thousands of years later near the headwaters of the Nile reveal sequences of notches arranged in apparent numerical patterns, groupings of 3, 4, 5, and more, sometimes mirroring one another on opposite sides. The lesser-known detail is that certain notched bones from this period are stained with ochre, suggesting they were handled and perhaps ceremonially marked rather than being purely utilitarian objects. In the flickering light from a small hearth at the cave's edge, the bone's pale surface reflects briefly before being darkened by shadow again. A young boy leans closer to trace the notches with a fingertip, the edges rough from fresh carving. The group does not speak in words as we know them, but their gestures and glances suggest a shared understanding. These notches are not decoration, but a record. The mystery persists in what exactly is being counted. Some patterns seem to correspond to the lunar month, others to a tally of days between seasonal events such as floods or herd migrations. A few researchers propose they might have been used for keeping track of exchange or obligations between groups, hinting at early forms of trade. On a planetary scale, this act represents one of the earliest known instances of humans using a physical medium to track an abstract concept across time. The notched bones become anchors for memory, surviving beyond the mind's ability to hold every detail. Outside, the river runs slow under the cloudy night, its surface broken only by the occasional leap of a fish. The people in the cave remain close to the fire, the marked bone resting in plain sight. Before sleep, the man who carved it adds one more notch, the sound of stone scraping bone quiet. but distinct in the stillness. This mark joins the others in a growing line that, though small, carries the weight of foresight. The marks may never be fully understood by those outside the group, but within this sheltered space, they form a link between past hunts, present needs, and future journeys. It is a silent continuity, one that will echo across millennia in other bones, other marks, and eventually other systems of number. Word count 6 metadistior. Awaiting continue. On the wide windswept plain, a cluster of prehistoric humans stands in the lee of a low ridge, using it as shelter from the dry season's gusts. In their midst, a long bone from a large antelope rests across two flat stones. The bone's surface carries fresh grooves, each one cut with precision, using a sharp flake of chert. Two individuals kneel beside it, one holding the bone steady while the other carves. Around them, others watch, their attention focused on the growing line of marks. This is not an isolated act. A smaller bone, already heavily notched, lies nearby, tied with sinew to a pouch containing red ochre powder. Archaeological evidence shows that bones from sites across Africa and Eurasia bear sequences of notches that appear to have been added over time, suggesting that counting was a cumulative process rather than a single event. The lesser-known detail is that microscopic wear analysis on some of these artifacts reveals repeated handling, indicating they may have been carried and consulted over months or years. As the carver leans in, the wind carries the scent of dust and distant rain. A group of hunters newly returned place bundles of dried meat beside the others, their eyes briefly shifting toward the bone before returning to their tasks. The mystery that persists is whether these early tallies tracked tangible items such as food portions, tools, or hides, or intangible cycles like the phases of the moon or the timing of seasonal plant growth. Without written symbols to clarify meaning, the patterns remain open to interpretation. On a planetary scale, the creation of such a tally represents a moment when human perception extends beyond immediate needs into a framework of past, present, and future that can be carried and shared. The group remains at the ridge until twilight, the horizon turning the color of ash and ochre. Before the fire is lit, the notched bone is wrapped in hide and placed with care inside a woven basket. It is not stored with ordinary tools, but set apart as though its purpose is of special importance. A child reaches toward it, but is gently pulled back by an elder who points toward the horizon, where the thin crescent moon has begun to rise. The elder's gesture lingers, connecting the marks on bone to the arc of light in the night sky. This association, bone and moon mark and cycle, will echo in other places in other hands across millennia. For now, the fire begins to crackle, casting low light across the group. The day's tallies are complete, fixed into the material world, where they can endure as memory beyond a single lifetime. Word count 642. Awaiting continue. In a sheltered valley where a narrow river curves between stands of acacia, a group of prehistoric humans sits on flattened ground near the base of a limestone outcrop. The air is heavy with the scent of damp earth after a recent rain, and the ground still holds dark patches where water has pooled. At the center, resting on a smooth slab of stone, is the long leg bone of a gazelle. Its surface shows two distinct rows of notches, one longer and one shorter, each carved with deliberate pressure by a stone flake. Three individuals lean over it, one steadying the bone, another carving, and a third pointing toward the shorter row as if recalling its meaning. Others sit nearby in small clusters, mending nets, straightening spear shafts or scraping hides, but their eyes occasionally turn toward the bone. Archaeologists studying artifacts such as the Ishango bone have noted arrangements of marks that appear to have mathematical relationships, with some rows adding up to specific totals and others forming mirrored patterns. The lesser-known detail is that on some ancient tally bones, the spacing of marks varies subtly, suggesting intentional grouping to separate sequences or denote categories. In the fading light, the carver adds another notch to the shorter row, the sound of scraping bone distinct in the valley's quiet. The group pauses briefly as if acknowledging the addition before returning to their separate tasks. The mystery lies in whether these marks recorded counts of animals taken days past, or perhaps a dual system tracking two different cycles, one shorter, one longer. Some researchers propose that such dual row arrangements could reflect lunar and solar cycles, or the timing of two seasonal events critical for survival. On a planetary scale, the very act of correlating two sequences hints at an expanding cognitive capacity. the ability to track multiple variables over time, and perhaps even compare them. Above the valley, the sky shifts toward a muted dusk clouds catching the last low light. The bone is placed in a shallow hide pouch along with other carved objects, a piece of antler marked with deeper grooves and a flat pebble smoothed by long handling. These are kept together possibly as part of a single toolkit for recording and reference. A child watches as the pouch is tied shut and set on a raised platform of sticks near the fire away from damp ground and wandering animals. The fire's smoke drifts slowly across the camp, carrying the faint smell of burning acacia wood. In this stillness, the marks on the bone exist, both as present record and as a thread connecting to the future holding meaning that will outlast the voices and gestures of those who made them. Whether anyone beyond this group will ever interpret them correctly is uncertain, but their existence marks a step in the long human movement toward abstraction memory and the shaping of time itself. Word count 657. Awaiting continue. Along the edge of a windswept plateau, a cluster of prehistoric humans gathers around a low fire sheltered by a ring of upright stones. The evening air is cold, carrying the faint scent of juniper from the sparse vegetation that clings to the rocky ground. In the glow of the fire, a freshly cleaned reindeer bone lies across the lap of an elder, its surface pale against the deep brown of their hide clothing. With a flake of flint, the elder draws shallow, precise cuts along one side, pausing after every few strokes to study the spacing. Beside them, a younger person leans in close, mimicking the motions in the air with their hand, while others sit in a half circle, some holding other marked bones as if comparing patterns. Archaeological evidence suggests that in colder regions during the late Pleistocene, such notched bones were often made from reindeer or other migratory herd animals, linking the act of counting directly to seasonal movements. The lesser-known detail is that residues of fat and soot have been found on certain bones, hinting that they were handled frequently near fires, perhaps during communal gatherings like the one unfolding here. The elder's motions are steady, deliberate. After a sequence of 5 marks is added, the younger one points to a separate series already carved on the opposite side, their brow furrowed in concentration. The mystery, as always, lies in the code of these marks. Do they count days since the herds passed or anticipate the number of days before their return? Some researchers have argued that parallel series may represent multiple counts running concurrently, perhaps tracking different herds or events. On a planetary scale, the scene embodies a significant adaptation in cold, resource-scarce environments. The ability to predict and prepare for the return of food sources is essential for survival. The firelight casts long shadows across the stone ring, illuminating the notches momentarily before they fade back into darkness. Once the carving is complete for the evening, the bone is passed around the group. Each person runs their fingers lightly over the grooves as though reaffirming a shared memory. A few add charcoal smudges near certain marks, a gesture that could indicate emphasis or categorization. Beyond the plateau, the night sky opens wide and clear, the arc of stars bright above the frozen ground. Somewhere in the dark distance, the muffled sound of animal movement carries faintly perhaps the very herds these people have learned to follow and record. The bone is finally placed into a wrap of hide and bound with sinew, stored with other marked objects inside a woven reed basket, lined with dry grass to keep out the frost. The fire burns lower and the group draws closer together for warmth, their shapes blending into the circle of dim light. In the cold quiet, the carved marks hold their silent meaning, a durable language of memory and foresight that will be carried forward as long as hands can cut lines into bone. Word count 6064. Awaiting continue. In the muted light of a cloudy dawn, a small group of prehistoric humans moves slowly along the bank of a wide, shallow river. The water is low, revealing patches of dark mud where hoofprints of antelope and wild cattle are pressed deep. At a spot where driftwood has collected, they pause to rest. One person unrolls a strip of hide, revealing a set of long bones wrapped carefully within. Each bone carries notches along its length, some in evenly spaced sequences, others in irregular groupings. The group gathers in a loose circle, crouched low on their haunches, the cool morning air carrying the scent of wet earth. An older woman lifts one of the bones, holding it so the cloudy light catches the carved lines. She gestures toward the river, then to a series of grouped marks, as if recalling the timing of past crossings by the herds they follow. Archaeologists examining bones from such riverine areas have noted that some tallies may have been linked to seasonal water levels, which in turn influenced migration patterns and plant growth. The lesser-known detail is that certain bones from similar sites show shallow secondary marks perpendicular to the main sequence, possibly acting as dividers or markers for significant events within the count. The woman traces one of these with her fingertip, then hands the bone to a younger man who adds a new notch near the end, using a sharp fragment of quartzite. The mystery lies in the precise relationship between the marks and the natural cycles they reference. Some researchers suggest a combined system where a single bone might track both animal movements and changes in the environment, such as the height of the river or the bloom of certain plants. On a planetary scale, this represents a growing sophistication in human observation, a recognition that survival depends not on isolated events but on patterns connecting many aspects of the landscape. The river flows quietly beside them, its surface disturbed only by the occasional ripple of fish. A child peers over the older woman's shoulder as she unwraps another bone, this one darker from handling and soot exposure. She points to two sections of closely spaced notches, perhaps indicating years of scarcity or abundance. After a final round of gestures and soft vocalizations, the bones are rewrapped, the hide bundle tied with sinew and placed into a woven bag carried by the youngest member of the group. The sun remains hidden, the light staying flat and gray as they rise and continue along the riverbank toward a cluster of low trees in the distance. Behind them, the mud and hoofprints will soon be smoothed by the next rain. But the records on the bones will endure, carried across seasons and territories. In these quiet moments, their simple carved marks link the past to the future, turning memory into a tool that can be held past and read by many eyes. Word count 656. Awaiting continue. In the dim interior of a rock shelter where the entrance faces east toward a pale morning sky, a group of prehistoric humans sits around a small, carefully tended fire. The walls are mottled with soot from many seasons of burning, and the floor is covered with dry grass and fragments of bone. At the center, a flat slab of sandstone serves as a work surface. Laid across it are three animal bones, each bearing a distinct sequence of notches. Two men kneel side by side, one holding a long antelope metatarsal, the other scraping a new groove with a pointed flake of obsidian. The others watch in quiet concentration, their eyes shifting between the carver's hand and the series of marks already in place. Archaeologists studying similar sites have noted that bones found together sometimes show progressive stages of marking, suggesting they were part of an ongoing record updated over months or years, rather than made all at once. The lesser-known detail is that residues of plant gum have been detected on some ancient tally bones, possibly indicating they were once affixed to a surface tied into bundles or secured within a frame. As the groove deepens under the controlled pressure of the obsidian tool, a younger woman leans forward and places another bone beside it, this one with shorter, more tightly spaced marks. She points to its middle section where a cluster of 9 notches is separated from the others by a faint incision running perpendicular to the series. The mystery here lies in the relationship between bones bearing different patterns. Were they separate records of unrelated events or components of a larger counting system, in which each bone tracked a different category? Some researchers have speculated that groups of bones could have served as a kind of portable archive, with each piece holding part of a broader seasonal or resource-based account. On a planetary scale, this represents the widening of human thought beyond single-purpose objects toward integrated systems of knowledge. The firelight flickers over the group's faces, catching on the glossy edges of the obsidian. Beyond the shelter's entrance, the light grows slowly stronger, revealing a landscape of dry grassland broken by scattered shrubs. One child, still too young to carve, sits apart, rubbing a smooth pebble over a fragment of discarded bone, imitating the motions of the adults. When the new notch is finished, the man lifts the bone, examining the sequence as though committing it to memory before laying it alongside the others. The group exchanges a few quiet vocal sounds, their tone even and unhurried. The 3 bones are bundled together with a strip of twisted sinew, wrapped in softened hide and placed in a niche at the base of the wall. Above the niche, a faint red smear of ochre marks the stone, perhaps a reminder of the bone's location or significance. The shelter grows warmer as the sun rises, but the fire remains steady, its smoke curling upward to darken the rock ceiling further. Within this space, each mark on each bone is part of a shared memory, enduring in material form long after the moment of its creation. Outside, the day begins to carry the scent of dry wind over the plains, but inside the carved bones rest in shadow, their quiet meaning preserved. Word count 672. Awaiting continue on a grassy terrace above a bend in the river, a group of prehistoric humans gathers under the soft light of an overcast afternoon. The terrace is sheltered on one side by a low cliff of weathered limestone, its base pitted with shallow alcoves. In the open space near a central hearth, several long bones lie in a row upon a flat piece of driftwood. Each bone carries its own series of carved notches, some deep and evenly spaced, others faint and irregular. Two women kneel side by side, one running her fingers along a bone's length, the other pointing to a cluster of marks near its center. A man squats close holding a fresh fragment of red ochre, ready to rub pigment into the newest cuts. Archaeologists examining similar artifacts have observed that pigment traces on tally bones can make notches more visible, especially in dim light, and may have served to distinguish important counts from others. The lesser-known detail is that certain bones show alternating pigment, and plain sequences perhaps dividing counts into separate categories or phases. The ochre dust spreads as the man works, filling the grooves with muted red that contrasts against the pale bone. Around them, others prepare fish caught from the river, gutting them on stone slabs, while glancing toward the work in progress. The mystery endures in the purpose of these color-enhanced marks. Did they serve as seasonal records, ceremonial tallies, or practical reminders tied to food storage and distribution? Without direct evidence, their exact meaning remains beyond recovery. On a planetary scale, adding pigment to notches reflects an evolution in record-keeping, a shift from purely tactile and visual sequences toward symbolic enhancement, making information more durable and distinguishable across time. The wind moves through the grass, carrying a faint scent of smoke from the hearth. A child crouches nearby, holding a much smaller bone with shallow scratches, mimicking the motions of the adults. When the ochre work is finished, the bone is lifted so the group can see the sequence clearly, its patterns briefly catching the soft afternoon light, before being placed back on the driftwood with the others. The people exchange a series of low vocal sounds, perhaps confirming the completion of a cycle or the marking of an event. As the light begins to fade toward evening, the bones are gathered into a bundle wrapped in hide and stored in the shallow alcove at the cliff's base, protected from rain and wandering animals. The hearth smoke thickens as fresh wood is added, its gray tendrils drifting upward against the limestone wall. Around the fire, the group settles into quiet work, the day's counting complete. Above them, the sky remains a uniform pale gray, the sun hidden but present, marking another turning in the sequence of days that will continue to be carved bone by bone across the seasons. Word count 662. Awaiting continue at the edge of a dense stand of willows near a slow-moving tributary, a group of prehistoric humans sits in the shifting light of early evening. The ground is soft with layers of fallen leaves, and the air carries the scent of damp vegetation and wood smoke from a nearby fire. In the center of their gathering space, a large flat stone serves as a work platform. Across it lies a freshly cleaned ibex bone, pale against the darker rock. Two men crouch on either side, one holding the bone steady while the other carves with a thin flint blade, the edge glinting faintly in the fading light. Several others lean forward to watch, their attention fixed on the slow emergence of new notches beside an older sequence. Archaeological finds from similar riparian zones suggest that notched bones here may have been linked to seasonal fishing runs or the return of certain game animals events tied closely to river conditions. The lesser-known detail is that wear patterns on some ancient bones indicate repeated handling with wet hands, perhaps suggesting their use during or immediately after such events. As the new mark is finished, the carver pauses, then uses the tip of the flint to deepen one of the older notches, a gesture that might indicate correction or emphasis. The mystery remains whether these adjustments altered the meaning of the tally or simply reinforced it. Some researchers argue that such revisions could point to an active living record, updated to reflect shifting conditions or group decisions. On a planetary scale, this capacity for modification, altering a record while preserving its continuity, reflects a growing human flexibility in managing knowledge over time. The light fades further, the canopy of willows filtering the last traces of the day. The fire nearby casts a warm glow and its smoke curls through the branches, drifting toward the water. A woman rises from the group and steps to the river's edge, scooping water in a woven container before returning to dampen the leaves around the fire's base, keeping stray embers from catching. The carved bone is passed from hand to hand, each person running their fingertips across the grooves, perhaps reaffirming their shared understanding of its meaning. When the bone reaches the eldest member of the group, they hold it upright for a long moment before placing it in a pouch lined with dried grass. The pouch joins others in a shallow pit, lined with stones covered over with bark to protect the contents from moisture. The sound of frogs begins to rise from the riverbank as the group settles closer to the fire, the warmth drawing them inward. The day's work, both practical and symbolic, is complete. Above the willow canopy, the sky darkens to a deep, even gray, and in the quiet between the rustle of leaves and the crackle of fire, the carved marks rest unseen, their purpose fixed, yet carried forward into the seasons ahead. Word count 6060. Awaiting continue on a broad plain where the grass bends in long waves under a steady wind, a small encampment of prehistoric humans has formed around a ring of low fires. The horizon is distant and open with only a line of dark hills marking the far edge of sight. Near the largest fire, several people kneel over a flat slab of limestone, its pale surface serving as a workspace. Laid out before them is a collection of animal bones, antelope, gazelle, and reindeer, each carrying carved sequences of notches. Two elders lean over the bones, their shoulders nearly touching as they examine the patterns. One points with a thin stick of charcoal to a cluster of closely spaced marks, then to a wider gap before the next set as if comparing intervals. Around them, others listen in silence, their faces lit by the shifting glow of firelight. Archaeologists studying similar assemblages have suggested that such gatherings may have served as communal reviews where multiple tallies were compared and interpreted. The lesser-known detail is that some bone collections from Pleistocene sites appear to have been curated for many years, with older pieces kept alongside newly carved ones, implying an awareness of continuity and record-keeping across generations. The fire pops softly as an ember collapses, sending a brief shower of sparks into the night air. A younger man holding a fresh antelope bone begins carving under the guidance of one elder. His notches are deep and deliberate, spaced evenly with visible care. The mystery, as with so many of these artifacts, lies in whether such deliberate spacing encoded a formal count or represented a rhythm learned by repetition and memory. Some researchers argue that without a written system, meaning would have been carried in both the marks and in the oral or gestural traditions accompanying them. On a planetary scale, this fusion of material record and communal memory marks a profound adaptation, knowledge preserved not only in the object, but in the shared practices that ensure its interpretation. As the carving continues, one of the women sorts through the older bones, arranging them in an arc on the limestone slab. Her hands pause on a particularly worn piece whose surface is polished from decades of handling. She holds it up so that the firelight traces its grooves, then returns it gently to its place among the others. Beyond the fire circle, the plain stretches into darkness. The wind carries the scent of dry grass and the faint tang of distant rain. A child sits beside the younger carver, eyes following each motion of flint against bone, absorbing without words the connection between gesture and meaning. When the final notch is cut, the elders nod, and the bone is rubbed with a smear of fine ash to darken its grooves. The pieces are then bundled together in a hide wrap tied with twisted sinew, and placed in a raised wooden frame to keep them from moisture and animals. The group remains gathered for a while longer, the bones safely stored the fire's light reflecting in quiet faces. Above them, the stars emerge, uncountable yet present, echoing the notches cut by human hands, both patterns enduring in their own measure of time.